Good afternoon and welcome. Didn't need a response, but I'll take it. I'm the stage manager. And before we begin Bill Brown's final production, we have a special guest. Please welcome the president of UMBC, Dr. Freeman Hrabowski.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yes. One of the things I love about this performance theater, I was delighted to come today because Bill Brown was my colleague and my friend. I think about today as a celebration of the life of a great Howard University alumnus. It is significant to note that he is someone who had a fine foundation even before coming here. We would not be standing here today if it were not for his vision and his leadership. I remember being in this space at the retirement of another colleague and looking at his face as I was talking. And what I saw was the point I want to make today. There was a smile on his face, a kind of understated approach. Students who knew him from 40, 50 years ago, a kind of power in his ability to understand so much and even say less. And his eyes told you the story, whatever it was. And what I think about is what it must have been to be an African-American man in the theater at an institution with people from all kinds of backgrounds working to lead. And what he did that was so remarkable was to bring together wonderful faculty to attract incredible students, to empower them to be the best that they could be. And if it were not for that visionary leadership and the authenticity with which he worked, again, we would not be in this space today. Who would have imagined that UMBC would be so well known as part of the American College Theater Festival, as part of the Kennedy Center, have sent on so many people, not only in theater, but in life itself. And so I'm here today to listen, to reflect, and to thank one of our greatest founders, someone who never asked for praise, someone who simply gave of himself. What better lesson in life than that of Bill Brown? Thank you.
Looking at the life of any man or woman is a daunting task. How do you even begin to capture the essence of someone? While most would struggle trying to do something like this, Bill made it somewhat easier by writing his own autobiography in 2003. You see, Bill gave his family the blueprint for today's celebration. Always the director. We are here to look at the life of an artist, a man who was dedicated to his profession. His dedication to theater affected not only lives, but the very institutions he served. Bill had this habit of joining or starting theater departments and institutions and developing outstanding, award-winning theater programs. Back in the 1950s, Cleveland, Ohio had the Caramoo Playhouse. African Americans had few places to hone their craft during those years. Back then, if you were a black actor, a playwright, a set designer, or a director, you found opportunities at black colleges like Howard University or the Caramoo Playhouse. Bill was a major player at both places. There is so much to share about Bill Brown's life, and yet we only have this brief moment in time today. We gather here today. Why? Because his life touched all of yours. Somewhere in your life, you either personally met or knew Bill, or you were touched by his work. Look around at this beautiful theater space. Take a moment to look at the fabulous performance space. It's one of the best. And buildings like this, as Dr. Rabowski mentioned and knows, doesn't get built by accident. They get built out of a need for growth. A young and small theater department gets on its feet, and in the early 1970s, it becomes a theatrical juggernaut. And so there is a need to grow and expand. Professor Brown didn't do it alone, but it wouldn't have happened without his contributions. Here is an example of Bill's role and contributions to black theater, the black theater icon from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. Please welcome his son, Kevin Brown.
Thank you all for coming today. So a couple of things. When you are a child growing up in a theater, you see the theater students, which look so old. They just seem so grown. You know, they're 19, they're 20. I mean, these are grown men and women in the eyes of an 8-year-old. But you don't have some perspective on your father's professional career. So I wanted to share a story of someone that I spoke with. My godmother is a graduate professor of English at Howard University. Her name is Eleanor Traylor. Now, we reconnected after many years having not spoken, and we were talking about my dad, and she shared something with me. She said, "You know, your father was Scottie Pippen." And I was like, "What? I'm sorry, what are you talking about?" And she said, well, for those of you who don't know who Scottie Pippen is, let me just background here. So Scottie Pippen was an NBA player who was called the glue that held the 6 NBA championship teams together for Michael Jordan. Scottie always played the other team's best scorer and was able to do anything on the court necessary to fill the gap. He was the ultimate wingman. Anything you needed, he could provide. He easily could have scored more, but he deferred to Michael Jordan, and he was the facilitator. So now Eleanor talks to me about this legend of American black theater named Owen Dotson. Now, for those of you who don't know Owen Dotson, let me give you a little background. Owen Dotson was born in 1914. He was a writer, teacher, director, and playwright. He began to write poetry and direct plays while attending Bates, where he earned his BA in 1936, Yale University, where he received his MFA in 1949. As a U.S. enlisted Navy in World War II, he wrote naval history plays for black seamen, and later became a leading figure in black theater. Some of his works included The Ballad of Dory Miller, and the poem A Black Mother Praying, which was a plea for racial integration in the 50s. Dotson's black history pageant called A New World A-Coming was performed at Madison Square Garden in 1944. The performance was highly successful, even praised by then Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia. So in 1947, Dotson began teaching at Howard University. Some of his more celebrated students were Debbie Allen, Earl Hyman, Roxy Roker, Amare Baraka, Ossie Davis, and we can add Bill Brown to that list of students. Dotson wrote novels and 37 plays. Owen Dotson liked to transpose classic Greek plays into African-American context. So, why do I talk about Owen Dotson and Scottie Pippen? My godmother looks me right in the eye and she says, Owen Dotson was the Michael Jordan of black American theater in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And she goes on to tell me, and just like Michael Jordan needed Scottie Pippen to win those NBA championships, Owen Dotson needed your father to become the successful playwright and director that he was. Now, Owen may have had a vision for a play, but without your father to make Owen's vision a three-dimensional reality on stage, it was just an idea in Owen's mind. Your father was Owen Dotson's Scottie Pippen, And without your father's skills as a set designer, there is no Owen Dotson legacy as an African-American icon in Black American theater. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, my father had this kind of impact on theater in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and the 70s and on. So I just wanted to share that story as I get some perspective on my father's legacy. Thank you.
Whitney LeBlanc is a friend and colleague of Bill Brown from the mid-1950s. To Bill's children, he was known as Uncle Whitney. Whitney stepped in to fill Bill's teaching position at Howard University, which allowed Bill and his family to spend 2 years in Nigeria from 1963 to 1965. Later in Whitney's career, he directed Bill's first wife, Alfie Brown, in the first TV soap opera with an all-black cast. That was on Maryland Public Television, by the way, place where I worked for 18 years. The show was called Our Street, and it was produced in Owings Mills, Maryland, at MPT. Whitney is a TV director and producer and literary author with over 25 years of work in the entertainment industry. Whitney is a published author and currently lives in the Napa Valley, California. Whitney was unable to be here today, but wanted to share his thoughts about losing his old friend. Once again, Kevin Brown.
Ode to Bill Brown. Ah, Bill. When I heard, I could not believe. It seems that you should live forever. I can never forget. In 1958, when you came to Karamu, there you were. You gave me my first lesson in tech theater and stage management. We became fast friends and then discovered we were brothers in Alpha Phi Alpha, a bond that ties like no other. Then, as if a planned design, you flew away to Africa in 1963, leaving your post at Howard University to me. Then, from my voice in Baltimore, came a chance remark, which led to a post at UMBC. This brought us closer, and there you were. Our Street became a regular association, with Alfie playing the lead actress in the television series. Then at Lincoln U in 1969, with brilliant stars we both admired, Tom, Winona, Ted, we created our next fellowship. And through all the years, your trains and beautiful models brought enjoyment and pleasure to all. No one can forget your Shakespeare on Wheels, which rolled through cities, towns, villages. Your best of times also had its worst of times. The pain from hands and legs and back surgeries were endured with the patience and love of God that you believed would never be more than he knew a believer like you could withstand. And through it all, we admired your courage and strength and resolve to keep on keeping on. But for us, the best was all a continued, growing, close relationship of families, friends, and loved ones. There you were. And now, here am I, with fond and precious memories of times past when you were here.
And now it's time to meet Robert Moulthrop. Robert met Bill in 1963 when Robert was Peace Corps volunteering in Nigeria. Robert directed Bill in a production of The Matchmaker, while Bill was working at the University of Ibadan. Known as Uncle Bob to Bill's kids, lots of uncles, Darryl, Robert is a dear friend of the Brown family. In 1969, Robert took all 3 of Bill's kids to live with him in New York City. Saturday Night Live resulted. That was a delayed response. That week in New York City was an adventure that Bill's adult children still talk about to this day. The kids went to Radio City Music Hall, Coney Island, saw the musical The Fantastics, and were introduced to his famous hamburgers mixed with red wine. Robert has become an accomplished playwright after many years in the corporate world. Robert wrote a piece he has asked to be read, as he was unable to attend today's event. Once again, Kevin Brown.
Very familiar. Hello. So Uncle Bob, as he's been introduced, really wanted to be here, but he was unable to make it, so he wrote this piece, and I want to share with you. Bill Brown, as I remember, Robert Moulthrop, September 2017. First, there was the smile. Always direct, always genuine. September 1963, on a porch of a home on the campus of the University of Ibadan in western Nigeria, that welcoming smile told me that regardless of where I was going to be for the next 2 years in the Peace Corps, I was home. I worked with Bill at the university for my 2 years of my Peace Corps tour of duty, and working with him there were lessons, spoken and unspoken, direct and by example. You have an idea? Let's see what might happen. You want to do this? What would it take? In 1964, the Shakespeare 400th anniversary, what would it take to design and build a mobile Elizabethan stage on which you could extract from six different Shakespearean plays in costume with 20 students, actors, traveling to 17 cities around western, eastern, northern Nigeria in 21 days? Bill smiled. This is going to be fun. And it was. From setting up in a rainstorm to playing at the Oba Palace in Benin, I probably butchered that, to parading through the streets of Calabar, Bill smiled at the challenges and made it happen every performance. That stage went up, electricity was found, and lights and sound systems were activated. The changing tent for actors, the audience ranging from a few hundred to over 2,000 in a soccer stadium. Amazing and wonderful. When I directed the West African premiere of Thornton Wilder's The Matchmaker, Bill not only designed the sets, but told me he wanted to play Barnaby, the second lead, the one who hides under the table in the hat shop. He managed to look about 14 years old, and there was that smile and that ready laugh. He nailed it. Brought the house down. I wasn't surprised when Bill took the lessons from Ibadan's traveling theater and made it happen and turned those lessons into traveling theater for Maryland and beyond. Bill was a great believer in the power of theater, the power of art, to reach out and transform. He believed it because he'd seen it happen. He'd made it happen. And he wanted and needed to share. For me, that was Bill's great lesson. Activate your passion. I'm glad we were friends, and I'll miss him.
And now a performance by Richard Arcusa, his son Daryl's best friend.
May I ask Kevin to come on stage, please?
Oh, good.
How to do that, son. Brothers do that to little brothers.
Only child alone and wild, gathering the sun. His hands were meant for different, but his heart was no enough. Left his home and left his home in a solitary way. And he gave to me a gift I know I never can repay. Why man behind a simple faith. Tried to be a soldier once, but his music wouldn't wait. Knew his love for discipline, the thundering melody. Gave to me a gift I know I never understand. The leader of the band is like that is I took growing but his blood runs through my instrument. His song is in my soul. I was never born militant man. I'm just a living legacy to the leader of the band. Thank you for the theater and the Shakespeare on the road. Thank you for Nigeria when it came our time to go. Thank you for the kindness of the times when you got tough. Daddy, I don't think we said I love you near enough. The leader of the ground attack, lies are growing old, but his blood runs through our instrument, and the song is in my soul. I was never born, though we made rounds, we're just a living legacy to the beat of the grounds. We're just a living legacy to the beat of the ground.
We now begin Act Two. We begin Act Two with Bill arriving at UMBC in 1970. Here, Bill would work for 27 years and was the chair of the theater department for a combination of 18 years. You are going to hear from some of his former students and colleagues. He arrived to find a new university with a young theater department. Theater as an academic major was a new concept, and Bill and his fellow faculty facilitated its steady growth. Let's take a few minutes to hear from some of the folks that knew him. Please welcome the actress and singer, Bill's era 1970s, Nancy Krebs.
What a joy and a pleasure and an honor it is to be here with all of you today. When I first heard about this event, I was asked by Kevin if I would share a song with all of you, and I agonized over what that song should be, because I thought, well, it should be something from the era, from the 1970s, should be something that has something to do with the theater, but instead I chose something that has a memory feel to it. And I would like to thank the Brown family for arranging this beautiful event, and at UMBC, the theater department, and the administration for allowing us to share this time, for sponsoring this event so we can share our memories. I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places where this heart of mine embraces all day through. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut trees, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you. Thank you. You know, that song has a lot of memory involved in it. The lyrics contain words that have a bittersweet quality, a yearning for the person who is no longer in the picture, but exerts a certain presence that is still felt. And I think that's the way we all feel about Bill Brown. You know, we could probably count on the fingers of two hands the numbers of people that have had an impact in our lives, especially in our formative years, those who molded, shaped, led, guided us to become the people that we are today. I would certainly count Bill Brown among the top 10 in my life. He was a guide, he was a teacher, he was a mentor, obviously he was a visionary, and just thinking about all the places that he brought theater to that people would have never experienced that joy and that thrill of live theater if it hadn't been for him. He was the quintessential theater man, and he brought that passion for the theater here at a time when we didn't have much to work with as far as a building. But he led us, he shaped us, he molded us. And I have an anecdote that I'd like to share with you, and I have a prop. This is a measuring tape. I took a 5-credit stagecraft class with Bill, and you know, if you ever took that class, at 5 credits, you gotta get a really good grade, or else it's really gonna impact that grade point average, isn't it? So I was really struggling to make an A, or at least a B+. And I was teamed with a dear friend, Don Collins, to build a set piece, a flat, that was going to be part of the box set for the importance of being earnest. At that time, I was also cast as Cecily Cardew in the importance of being earnest. So Don and I went about making our flat. Bill always used to say, measure twice, cut once. Measure twice, cut once. So Don and I started making this flat. We had this 1x3 on the floor, and the measurement was supposed to be 84 7/8 inches. So Don held one end of it, and I extended it to 84 7/8. Don said, right? Yes. Are you sure? Yes. Okay, so we built that flat. And when we stood it up against everybody else's, it was 1 inch too short. And of course, in those days, we had to put our initials on the back. And so Bill said, oh, look, there's one that's too short. I said, uh-oh. And he said, who built this one? And Don and I looked at each other and said, well, Bill, it was us. Sorry, sir. He said, well, did you measure twice and cut once? And I said, I don't really think so, Bill. I really don't think so. I don't remember. And he said, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. He said, I'm not going to destroy this flat. I'm not even going to change it. I'm going to paint it like all the rest of them. We're going to stand it up on the stage, and every night, when you come out of Cecily Cardew, you're going to see that 1 inch too short flat. And it will remind you to do what? Measure twice, cut once. I've never forgotten that. Every time I pull out a tape measure. I think of Bill. I say, measure twice, Nancy, cut once. He taught us more than theater. He taught us life skills. And for that, I am eternally grateful. And you know, I also have some personal anecdotes. I don't want to take too much time, but I'm looking over at Darryl, and I'm thinking, I remember babysitting for Kevin, Darryl, and Opani, who was at the time Camilla, and they entrusted their children, their precious children, with me for a brief period of time. And I think I also taught Darryl his first guitar lessons. Did I?
Yeah, you
Oh my goodness gracious. Yeah, see, you're still playing. That's wonderful. So we have so many memories, collective memories, and he made a tremendous impact on my life. Before I leave, I'd like to do just what Rick did and take that beautiful song, I'll Be Seeing You, which was written by Sammy Fain and Irving Kahal, which made its way into many movies and plays. Bing Crosby made it popular. But I'd like to adapt the words to share some memories and images that I remember of Bill. I hope I remember them. I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. In that classic play, the marquee across the way, the set design that works so well, the measuring tape, the night gem. I'll see you in every Wednesday matinee, in every farce or cabaret. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the shop at dawn, and when the night is new, I'll be watching Much Ado, but I'll be seeing you. Thank you, Bill.
Our next reminiscence comes from 70s theater student Gus Demos. Gus?
An able administrator, a technical theater virtuoso, the most even-tempered theater person I've ever met. An innovator, resourceful, and a sublime choreographer. A giver, a nurturer, a mentor, a wonderful audience, a listener, a dear friend. Bill spent his working life with young people. He spent his working life among 18 to 22-year-old hotshot wannabes who who knew for a fact that the world revolved around them. And he let them believe it. When I entered UMBC, it was with the secret desire to pursue theater. I was fortunate to be taken in by a large group of students with a zeal to be in production all the time. Bill made that happen. He, along with Will Hicks, founded the Summer Rep program. We rehearsed a play for less than 2 weeks, then performed it. And then we did another one, and then we did a third one. And then we performed the 3 plays in repertory for 2 weeks. Counting summer rep, we produced at least 7 main stage productions a year. That doesn't count the student productions that Bill gave his encouragement and expertise to, not to mention the use of the hall. Bill did not say no. If I were selfish, which I am, but that's another story, I would want to believe that he had a special place in his heart for our passionate group of students. But I know that's not true. You have only to listen to those who knew him before and those who knew him after our time to know that with Bill, grace was the common theme. And it wasn't as if the university administration showered the theater department with funds to allow us to feed our addiction. I remember that each year I was here, the rumor went around that the theater budget had been cut. Each year, more cuts. Bill found a way for us to keep doing what we had to do. I'm sure that situation has been rectified by the current enlightened university administration. Now, I'm not saying that Bill never got upset, not that he got angry. Exasperated was more his style. Sometimes he was at a loss when confronted with the things that 20-year-olds chose to do. He was a very patient teacher in the shop. He made sure we knew how to use the tools, especially the power tools. I was in his tech theater class one day, and one of our classmates was trying without much success to use a ratchet screwdriver. The class gathered around her as she continued to struggle, finally muttering, "I know how to screw." Over our laughter, she blurted, "I do. My boyfriend taught me." Amid the general hysteria, Bill came to her rescue saying, "Marie, I know what you're talking about." Several of us continued to see Bill and Fran occasionally, usually at Tim and Linda O'Hara's house. The last time we saw him was about a month before his passing. Bill was, as he always was that day, sharing lots of stories and lots of laughs. I mentioned at the beginning that he was a sublime choreographer. That's not a joke. You would have had to be there, but in the last 2 weeks of summer rep, when we would change sets from tonight's play to tomorrow night's play, Bill drew up a set-changing scheme that involved 20 people, each with a different set of tasks, timed to be executed in exact order, such as Gus takes the chair stage right and moves it to its storage place off left, then comes back to put the pins back in the flats for Blythe's spirit, then gets the fruit bowl from off right prop table and puts it on coffee table. While Gus was doing his tasks, 19 other people were doing their series of tasks and combining in a living Rube Goldberg contraption. He had us rehearse the set changes until we could do them in about 10 minutes. When I learned of Bill's passing, these words from Julius Caesar came to me. His life was gentle, and the elements so mixed in him that nature might stand up and say to all the world, this was a man.
And now representing the class of 1972, please welcome Paul Sekulich. Paul? Paul, did I say your name correctly?
Listen,
Well, what is it?
it's secure.
Really?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
I don't know about Gus or the microphone, but I was trained by Bill to be an actor.
Ba-bing!
I had a teacher in sociology in Florida who pronounced my name differently every day in his class. His class had almost no absenteeism because they wanted to come and hear how he was going to pronounce my name. He started off with the alphabet, given the task, the role of his class. And he would go down to Schneider, Bob, do you prefer Robert or Bob? Okay, Schultz, and then he would go, oh, Jesus. Skieslich? I said, it's Sekulich, sir. He said, Seklak, I got it. Don't confuse me. So on it went, and throughout the year, I was Mr. Suckowitz. For a while, I was Mr. Seductive. I got an A on his final, and he wrote, great paper, Mr. Superbovich. That was fantastic. He was a great teacher. Anyway, Bill Brown was a man you liked the moment you set eyes on him. And you liked him until you fell in love with him. I can still see him going down that long walk between the parking lot where the theater was to the science buildings and the lecture hall, making those little short fast steps, speeding along with feet going out in both directions, and stopping to compliment every person he met and passed. He loved Shakespeare. We said if he'd have been a hangman in Shakespeare's time, he would have said to the condemned, you have really a terrific neck. That's the kind of guy he was. And when Towson got the money for the theater that looked like this, and we had that little thing over there, Bill, very much like George Washington Carver, who was given land that nothing would grow on, and planted every seed he could, and as we all know, peanuts came up, and he made 300 different uses of it, and also cross-planting, and some of the other things that he did that were magnificent at Tuskegee Institute. Bill Brown did the same thing with that theater. And the first day he came out to talk to us about it, he said, remember, when Towson has 300 people out of the 1,200 seats, it looks like it's a stinking show. It's a turkey. When we have 300 people, we're SRO. Think about that. He was always putting a positive spin. And the thing that was most enjoyable about that was that we as theater majors were not to be viewed as basket weaving crib people, so they made the major much bigger in requirement than in almost anything else, where they had 40 credits to, and their major plus the general distribution requirements. We had 44, 46 credits, and one of his classes, Gus alluded to, play production, which was 5 hours. We lived in the theater. We had no food, no money. And so the lady in the cafeteria had all these bags of lunches piled up on a table around 3:30, 4 o'clock. And I said, what do you do with those? She said, well, I throw them in the trash because all the kids want to eat is pizza. I said, can we have them? I would bring them over to the theater so we could, and these were great, homemade cookies, nice sandwiches, and everything else, and we survived living in the theater. But the theater was so small that if you had to go out stage left and come in on stage right without being seen, you had to go outside. And if it was raining and snowing, as it was one night when Mike Barczyk went out in The Devil's Disciple to try to come in, and both doors were locked, and went back to the other door, it was locked. And he ran around to the front of the building to the lobby where a young girl told him he couldn't come in without having a ticket. Bill Brown saved him. He said, he's in plain clothes. He roared through the back of the hallway, came onto the theater out of breath, where we had lived for about 14 hours. So Bill said to me one day in the office, he said, I don't know what you guys said on the stage. He said, I was trying to get Mike. He said, but I've always been fascinated by people who can think on the spot and ad-lib. He said, what's your favorite ad-lib story? And I said, well, it really didn't happen in the theater. I said, the funniest one I remember is one that Irma Baumbeck, the famous humor writer of the 60s and 70s, wrote about her best friend. They lived in the Midwest, and they had houses that had basements. And in the basement was the washer and the dryer. Every Monday after the kids were gone to school and the husband was gone, her girlfriend would come downstairs in just a house coat. And she would stand in front of the washer and sort the laundry, but there was a drip in the pipe. So she took her son's old high school football helmet and put it on, and let the rain spatter on her head, and she sorted the laundry. And as would happen, it wasn't a full load. So she decided to take off the house coat and put it in there to fill it up. Now she's standing with the rain on her helmet, and this red helmet with a white stripe and nothing on, and she gets the eerie feeling that she's not alone. And she turns, and there in the corner of the basement, cram, he wouldn't even see, is the gas and electric guy. He knows he has to go past her. And he went by her and he said, I hope your team wins. And out the door he went. Well, Bill loved that joke so much. He used to say to us before he went on stage, I hope your team wins. But he also had kids in the class in the first day of play production. There's always somebody in the class and somebody in life that reads the last page of the book, wants to know how the movie ends. My wife's one. So somebody jumped up and said, what's the final going to be like? Like Brown? He said, you're going to take a professional play and draw the set. And the kid went high five and he said, no 3-hour writing essays. We're going to just write the drawing and give it to the guy. I said, don't let that cherubic face, that captivating smile fool you. He's going to teach you play production and stagecraft. Come the day of everybody turning in those drawings, I stayed for 2 days over the weekend. Security was bringing me coffee over in his office where there was a drawing board. And I had picked this My Three Angels, which was a tropical French penal island site, so there were a lot of palm fronds and that kind of stuff. Anyway, Dave Peter, who's here today, ironically, I was telling him outside, he would coming out of the office as Bill would mark the papers and put the rolls in a box. Dave would be the town crier. He'd come out, because we were all sleeping in the lobby from his office. And he said, what do you man, at 37? Now we're terrified. And he goes, Harold DuPont, he got a 42. Well, this was going back and forth. Nobody was getting anywhere with these things. Bill was really going over these things. Finally, he walks out, totally different demeanor. He steps over to me and he says, I just saw your paper. I said, what did I get? He said, a 98. I said, what was wrong? So I went to Bill. I said, what did I get wrong? He said, you had 12 feet on 2 instances when it should have been 12 feet, 0 inches. I said, well, aren't you the nitpicker? He said, I had to find something wrong with it. Bill took another turn when we did student directing I guess you just call them one-act plays, but everybody had to direct the play. And if many of you may remember, to be a director, you had to cast people that were in the department, and it wasn't exactly like central casting. You had to take people, and in reverse, you had to work in their play just to sort of even the score. So this gal named Eileen Albert went to him and said, I want Paul Sekulic to be in a play of mine. And she said, I need to pick a one-act play that he would be good at. And so they poured over it for a while, and finally he said, Paul likes Tennessee Williams. Mooney's Kid Don't Cry is a one-act play, just requires a woman and a man living in New York in this seedy apartment. So she said, would you like to do it? I said, I'd love to do it, because Marlon Brando did the part on Broadway, and I love Marlon Brando. And I said, who's going to do the woman? She said, I've got a gal named Denise. And I said, Denise? There's nobody in the theater department named Denise. She said, she's a chem major. I said, oh, good. I said, chem major. She said, look, if you don't like her, after the first read-through, I'll get somebody else that you approve. Fair enough. We read. This young lady read like she was an actor. I said, what are you doing in chemistry? She said, you can't make any money in liberal arts. So she said, but I've always wanted to act. And so we went through rehearsals. And in this play, this guy is a lumberjack living in New York, trapped by a wife and a child, a baby. And he really longs to be out in the woods, and he's apparently got this woman in a family way. And Tennessee Williams wrote this in the 40s, so he had to be kind of careful with how he said things. But at some point, they get into a massive argument. And Mooney glares at her and he says, you know what you are? He said, you're nothing but a skinny yellow cat, which was tantamount to saying something much more serious. She puts down the baby and she says, what did you call me, Mooney? And gets right up in his face. He said, you heard me, skinny yellow cat. Well, she slaps him. That gives him provocation to choke her, and he realizes he's throttling her, he drops her, goes over to stage right to a window, and delivers this soliloquy to the stars about his plight in life, wanting to be a lumberjack. All through rehearsals, the slap is... So it got to dress rehearsal, and I said, Eileen, you've got to work on Denise with a little more slap. I said, you know, I'm supposed to choke her. So we went back in the dressing room, talked to her. She said she'd try to do better. Dress rehearsal night. So Bill came out. He was working as stage manager for the show. And he talked to her, got her crying. She started crying. So, opening, by the way, these things packed that theater. Everybody loved to come see these one-act plays. A lot of the faculty came. Alvin Meckler was sitting on the first row. I remember that because he was like the last person I saw at one point. So he said, you've got to give Paul motivation. She said, motivation? Okay. She said, you've got to really kind of pop him. He played football. He was in the Marines. You can hit him. So she said, I really don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to hurt anybody. So it comes the night of the play, and the act's we're going to think, you're a skinny yellow cat. What did you call me, Mooney? I said, you heard me. At that moment, a hand was coming out of the Ohio Valley. Skinny yellow. It was now doing Mach 7. And when I said, put the T on cat, she slapped me so damn hard, I spun around and hit the cycling around 30 feet away. And when I turned around, there were 4 of her. But fortunately, I had 8 arms. I'm killing this woman. Oh, it is. All 4 of her damn neck. When I saw her eyes bugging out, I realized I was killing me, the doctor, and I went over to stage right where Bill was waiting, and he said, Paul, are you all right? And I said, I delivered a soliloquy from Jean Louise Antigone from King Creon. That's what happened here. One day he told Kid, he said, make sure you complete the action of things you do on stage. When you open the door, close the door, make sure it's closed. When you put something down, make sure it's down. This kid comes on stage, round table, down center, puts his arms on the table. goes over to deliver another one. There's a little bit of a quiet place in the play. And this orange starts rolling around the table. Goes around the table. Now everybody in the audience and the cast are all going. Went around twice, bounced off the table, rolled down, and set. And everybody applauded the orange. We had to bring it out for a curtain call. Anyway, Maya Angelou said that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never ever forget how you made them feel. He never made anybody feel better than that, and as good as I did all my life with him. He always made you feel good. He was a professional, consummate professional. And I asked him one day, what was a professional like? He said, a professional is a person around whom all others' work is easier. Bill Brown.
Paul's one-man special on HBO. Hope your team wins this Saturday. Elvis, Prince, Paul. And now, from the class of 1982, please welcome Gary Corbin.
Good afternoon. Wonderful presentation. Okay, now I'm walking on a really bad artificial leg right now, but came all the way from Vegas to do this anyway, okay? Today is like, if I were to sum it up very briefly, I would say that today is one of the happiest, most liberating days of my entire 60 years on Earth. And the reason that it's one of my happiest days is because of this gentleman right here, Professor Bill Brown, a mentor, an African-American role model that we say we don't have enough of, a father. And he wasn't just a father to his kids, he was also the father to me that I never knew. In addition to Bill Brown, it was his wife, Alfredine Brown, Alfredine Parham Brown, who a couple of people mentioned earlier. You see, she was in charge of a summer program, and yeah, they had funding for that back then for kids who were in the ghetto before it actually became the hood. And she introduced me to her husband, Bill Brown. And I'm going to call him Professor Brown because that's who I was raised to be, and that's how I was raised to speak about my fathers. You see, in 1975, that was my first year at UMBC where I was going to major in theater. But I ended up losing most of my right leg to osteogenic sarcoma, which is the type of bone cancer that Ted Kennedy's son put on the map. Right away I was told, because I was in a teenage acting troupe at the time, right away I was told, oh, forget about acting. You can't be an actor. Well, 42 years, and by the way, I'm standing up here liberated, one of the most liberating moments in my life, because I'm able to stand here, a 42-year cancer survivor, an actor, a producer, the first arts administrator at the Maryland, director of performing arts at the Maryland State Arts Council. And Bill Brown, Professor Brown, was one of my panelists. And one of the most proudest days of my life was when he was able to sit around the table with the rest of the panelists when we were deciding who was going to get funded. Funding is important. He said, I'm very proud to see one of my students in this position. That's why today I feel like shouting like a sanctified black woman in the back. But of course, it's not that type of production. I don't have it. It wasn't enough time for me to get my cap and my tambourine and to blow up a couple of balloons. And, but what I can do is rest in the bosoms of women, African American women like my grandmother, my mother, who was my biggest fan when I was at UMBC, and Alfredine Brown. You see, after I lost my leg and went through the chemotherapy and got my first prosthetic leg. Oh, by the way, back then, I don't want to digress too much, but back then, there was a senator by the name of Ted Kennedy who was a Democrat, and a Republican from Kansas City, the same Kansas City that a white lady, Dr. Alice Robinson at UMBC, that Republican and that Democrat got together to help this amputee with a pre-existing condition get his prosthetics funded by health insurance. Yeah. So I'm getting ready to get another one so that when the next time I come out on stage, I'll be stepping, and I may even shout too. Or dancing, I can turn this Proud Mary on one leg. Showing New York. But it's because of people like Professor Brown. When other people were telling me to forget it, Alfredine Brown sent me to her husband, and I walked up to his office and I said, Professor Brown, this is the thing I love doing most in my life. It's the most important thing to me. And, you get all types of people, and I like to hear, all types of things, the pros and the cons, you shouldn't, the whole thing. I love it all because I've reached a point where I can absorb it and then go from there. But I like people who have a how do we make this happen kind of approach to things. The type of person who was born in the 20s when people couldn't even vote. The type of person whose grandfather saw people hanging from trees lynched or what have you. The type of person who treated people like they were human beings and did everything they possibly could to not tell us who we weren't, but to tell us who we are. UMBC told me to dig deep inside of myself, dig whatever wonders that were out there, and just release it to the world and say, yes, this is me. Hey, Mr. Orenstein, here I am. With Bill Brown and Dr. Alice Robinson, and Alfie Brown, and my mother, and all different types of people, and every white, progressive thinking white male, like the one who made me director of performing arts programs, who said, you are Gary. You're not a one-legged this and you ain't a black that. You are somebody who has ideas. You are somebody who deserves to realize your fullest potential as both an artist and a human being. So thank you. Thank you for Professor Brown. I mean, nowadays we got the P. Diddy's and we got the Kanye West and we got the Snoop Doggy Dogg. That's fine. That's fine. But one reason that I'm going to name this story The Liberation of an Angry One-Legged Black Man is because I have found that people like Mr. Brown will always be there to tell you. You take that anger and you challenge it and you channel it, into something that's not going to destroy yourself or destroy others or destroy the cause. So, that said, a little shameless plug here, because I think he would want me to do it. I know it's about him and not about me. But because of Professor Brown In a few more weeks, I'm going to use my recent Master of Science in Counseling Option Rehabilitation Counseling and merge it with my BA in Visual and Performing Arts slash theater. I am going to have the courage and conviction to stand up like this man did and say we are all have the right, God-given right, to reach our fullest potential as artists and human beings.
Hallelujah.
Thank you, because today is our day of liberation. It's our day of celebration. It's our day of people from every type, black, white, young, old, rich, poor, one-legged, two-legged, whatever. That's the world that Mr. Brown, Professor Brown, Bill Brown has worked so hard to create, and by us all sitting here, we are saying that we are going to continue with that legacy.
Our next reminiscer, if such a word exists, is colleague and best man, Sam McCready. Sam?
Thank you. By describing me as a best man, that is no reference to any merits that I might have. It's simply that I was honored to be invited by Bill to be the best man at his wedding. And that was a very, very special honor for me, as you may imagine. How on earth do I follow such tremendous speeches that we've had this afternoon? How do I follow Freeman Hrabowski, who in a comparatively few words sums up Bill Brown to a T? You caught him exactly, sir. And how do I follow the rich lived experiences of those who were touched and empowered by the presence of Bill Brown in their lives? The detail with which each of these people spoke, these students of earlier years, the detail tells us of the impact of Bill Brown on their lives. And you know, at such a moment, I feel irrelevant. What have I to add to what you have just heard? I came to UMBC in 1984. I came from Ireland. I had worked in New York, and Bill invited me to join the faculty at UMBC. Before I came to take up my position, Bill and his wife Alfie invited me to come and stay in their home so that I could acquaint myself with the campus and with the faculty and other details that I really needed to know. Because remember, I came from a very different system. I had taught University of Wales and the University in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Very different systems from I was to encounter here in the United States. In the course of my stay with Bill, he began talking about Shakespeare on Wheels and describing the program that he had set up in Ibadan. His passion for that work, the stories that he told me, thrilled me, so much so that I said, Bill, we're going to do Shakespeare on Wheels here. I had come to UMBC for a challenge. And very early on, he presented me with that challenge of mounting Shakespeare on a reconstruction of the Globe Theatre stage and touring it around this area and neighboring states. That was a challenge which I had not had in all my years of experience of the theater. And I rose to that challenge, and I discovered stuff about Shakespeare. I discovered stuff about how to mount Shakespeare. I learned so much through the experience of working with Bill on the 10 productions which we did in the course of the life of Shakespeare on Wheels. There are many stories to be told about Shakespeare on Wheels from those who were part of it. Wonderful stories. But there is one that stays with me, and I have to say, I chuckle every time I think of it. And yet, this story could have had a very serious ending. We were doing the Comedy of Errors, and I had set it in the Roaring Twenties in Chicago with all the music and all the glamour and the visual elements which Bill incorporated into his set design, and Elena Zlotescu also translated into her extraordinary costumes. I'd had an idea that a moneylender in the play, Angelo, would in fact bring out lots and lots of money, and he would throw that money all over the audience, and it would be a very, very exciting moment. I told Bill about this. It was on the props list. But you know, Bill took things very, very seriously. He was a professional. He wanted everything to be exact. And so, Bill said, "How much money do you want?" I said, thousands of dollars. I said, "Remember, we're doing it for 25 performances, and I want thousands every night." Now, a lesser man would have said, "What on earth are you talking about, you little Irishman?" No, Bill took it seriously. And when I went down to the workshop, well, it was like Fort Knox. It was like a mint, because he had copied the dollar, $1, $2, $5, 20, 50, and I'm sure there were thousands. And all of these people were all at these copying machines, turning out thousands upon thousands of them. And then they had to take a pair of scissors and cut out each of the dollars. Well, we did a performance in Bel Air, and the money was all there. And when Angelo came forward and pulled out all of these dollars and threw them towards the audience in the open air, and they came down like so much confetti all over them. And grown-up men were seen to rise up from their chairs, from their blankets, and grab hold, one after the other, of these banknotes. And children who were there spent the rest of the performance scavenging for dollars, and their pockets were stuffed with them at the end of the performance. You know, that moment was one of the highlights of that performance. I couldn't believe how well it worked. Bill and Alfie were in bed. That gets your attention, doesn't it? Bill and Alfie were in bed at 1:30 in the morning when there was an insistent banging on the front door. Over and over and over again. Now, Bill, being the patient man that we have heard about, got up in his pajamas, and he came downstairs, opened the door, and said, "Can I help you?" And they said, "We're from the FBI. Can we have a word with you?" Bill took them into his sitting room, and they told him that they were accusing him of being a counterfeiter who was distributing fake banknotes in Bel Air. That shopkeepers from Bel Air had been in touch with the FBI to say that people were coming into their stores with fake money. Children were buying all kinds of things, turning up at the counter and presenting these things to them. They were worthless. What Bill hadn't realized was that according to the rules of this great country, when you reproduce one of the banknotes, it must not be the same size as the real thing. Whether on television, in theater, or whatever the media is, it has to be enlarged. Bill, in his exactness, his need for verisimilitude, had made them exactly the same and found a particular shade of green paper so that they would be so exact. He explained to him that it was a play. You know, how do you tell the FBI that you've reproduced all this money for a play? However, they told him that they wouldn't serve the warrant, which they were entitled to do, and that he, in fact, could be fined. He could be sent to prison for a fair number of years for what he had done. They said, what you have to do is to collect all that money. How much did you copy? Thousands, said Bill. They said, well, get the thousands together again, get it to a police station tomorrow morning, or we will serve the warrant on you. And Bill, of course, took all of this, with the smile, with the gentleness, a certain innocence, and he was going to do the right thing for me, reproducing these. And of course, he didn't realize that he was actually falling foul of the law. And it so happens one of these 50 banknotes wasn't returned. Now, let me say that I didn't steal it. But you may connect with this, that you put on a jacket, you have something or other, you put it in a pocket, you don't wear it for a couple of years. One day you wear it again, you look in your pockets, and that's what happened to me. I discovered that I had one of these fake banknotes, and now it is kept with the archive of the Shakespeare on Wheels productions, which I have. Bill was not elitist. Bill wanted to share everything he had. His talent, his warmth, his generosity, with each and every student who came in through his door. And can I tell you, that door was not closed. That door was ever open. And they would sit with him, and he would deal with whatever problems they had. And there were many problems. And when they came out from his office, they came out walking taller, stronger. And they felt that whatever they had taken into that room to discuss with him, he had miraculously made it so much lesser, and that now they were in a position to deal with it. He insisted that Shakespeare on Wheels should be free to people. He didn't want any charge. When it was getting more and more difficult to get money for the program, a program which was supported largely by UMBC, and also each of the venues paid to have the show go there. And when that money was getting tighter and tighter, the venue said, "We'll charge." Bill said, "No. We won't charge, but we'll put a hat around and we'll get some money." He said, "No. Shakespeare on Wheels is free to all." And that was a measure of the man, Bill Brown. It's appropriate that we are celebrating his life and accomplishments in this theater, because from the moment I knew Bill was working to have a new theater built on this campus. And members of the faculty, Wendy, who's here, Terry, Xerxes, Elena, Freeman, leading the way to try to get a theater. Sadly, he was no longer chair and had retired from the university when this wonderful new theater was built. But I somehow feel that celebrating his achievements today in this theater connects him with it in a very special way, and that his spirit is here with all the wonderful conversations we have had, and the talks we have had, and the entertainment we've had from the musicians. And your attendance here. I loved Bill Brown. I loved him dearly. He was a gentleman. Joan and I sat the other day talking about how many gentlemen do we know in our lives. Bill Brown was a gentleman. Thank you.
And now we would like to welcome the current theater chair of UMBC to our stage. Please welcome Colette Searles.
That was so lovely. This is a really remarkable event. I just want to acknowledge and thank the Brown family and friends for putting this together. We've been talking about this for almost a year, and I'm just so pleased to see everyone, and these stories are so heartwarming. Just a nod to what Sam just said. Yes, Bill wasn't technically on the faculty anymore when this wonderful new building came into being, but he was here. He's Professor Emeritus, he still is. He came to many events here. He came to many celebrations. He was always part of our community. And moreover, he continues to contribute through the Shakespeare on Wheels, the William T. Brown Shakespeare on Wheels Scholarship, which many of you have contributed to. The family's been tremendously supportive of. And I'm very happy to introduce 3 students and former students who are here to talk about how they've benefited from this scholarship very recently. Well, I don't know if you can see them. The lights are in my eyes, so I can't see as well. But I'll step over here. First, we have Ramon Burris. I'm going to ask you guys to go ahead and come on up. Why don't all 3 of you come on up? Ramon Burris is a recent alumni of our program. He's acted on both of these stages, and he's very special because he has received 2 Shakespeare on Wheels scholarships. We have Shibangi Kuchibotla. I would just mispronounce that because I'm standing on stage. I'm so sorry. I do that. But Shibangi is a wonderful actress. She's rehearsing right now on this stage. And she's also double majoring in business, which is a huge achievement in itself. Meredith Fade is one of our scenic design students who carries Bill's legacy forward. We have a wonderful and robust scenic design program now. And she's representing her friend and classmate, Mia Rickenbach, and they were both able to enjoy Shakespeare on Wheels scholarship this summer, and she has a special gift from Mia here. So they'll all 3 talk briefly about their experiences and what they benefited from in this summer program, thanks to the funding of this scholarship.
Good afternoon, everybody. Bill Brown has touched my life and my pursuit of a career in theater so greatly. And I'm going to try to put it in just a few words. In the summer of 2015, I attended the Williamstown Theater Festival as an apprentice. The summer of 2016, I had the opportunity to study at the Circle and the Square Theater in New York City. In both situations, I had the opportunity to perform, to see theater that I otherwise would not have been able to see, meet people I otherwise would not have been able to meet professionally and peer-wise, study and learn from people I otherwise would have never had the opportunity to come in contact with, and none of that would have been possible without William T. Brown and the Shakespeare on Wheels Scholarship. And in fact, if it weren't for Bill, I would have spent both of those summers in the Inner Harbor performing as Funky Frank, the abnormally stinky pirate. Thank you, Bill. The plain and simple, William T. Brown has had as much to do with my amazing experience here at UMBC studying theater as anybody else has. He has had the strong effect that all the people involved in this department have had on me, and I never even met him, and that's what has touched me the most, is that a man with so much generosity, I find that impressive about him. I did my research, and I've heard all the anecdotes and the testimony. This man was great. He touched a lot of lives. If when he retired in '97, if he retired and said, that's enough, that's all I'm going to do, it would have been enough. I know this department wouldn't be here without him, but he didn't, and he took the time to make a way to give back to his community. And so, in all honesty, I know the future is extremely unpredictable, as I'm sure everybody in this room could attest to. 10 years ago, I did not think that I would be pursuing a career in theater. 10 years from now, I may have that career. I may be doing something as far removed from the theater as possible, but there is one thing I do know, and it's that I will be affiliated with the UMBC Department of Theater, and it's because of the example that Bill Brown set, giving back to his community. Thank you, Bill.
Hello. My name is Shubhangi. I'm a senior. Hopefully I will graduate this May. Cross your fingers. This summer I had a life-changing experience, and it's because of the Shakespeare on Wheels Scholarship and Mr. Bill Brown. So before I continue, I want to say thank you, Mr. Bill Brown. So this summer I got to study at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in London. Crazy, I know. And I got to study with such talented people, be in a space that such beautiful actors studied and still study. I was in London enjoying the city, and that could not have been possible without Mr. Brown. And I remember being younger and sitting with my traditional Indian parents, and my brother being super extraordinary and saying, I'm going to be a mad scientist, and me looking at my parents saying, I'm going to be a mad actress. and telling them, I am going to go to the Royal Academy. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I will. And it's just so crazy to think about that I actually did do that. And it's because of Mr. Bill Brown. I left London with a heart full of love and a flame in my soul, and it's because of Mr. Bill Brown for granting me with such beautiful opportunity. So thank you.
Hello. My name is Meredith Fade. I'm a student here at UMBC, and I am currently of junior status. I am majoring in design and production with a focus in scenic design and artistry. This summer, I had an amazing opportunity as well to attend a 3-week-long course in White Lake, New York, specifically to study scenic painting techniques at Cobalt Studios. I learned under the instruction of Rachel Keebler and Kim Williamson, two goofy gals who have mastered this art and have been teaching young people like myself how to develop these skills since 1988. This was made possible through Mr. William T. Brown's Shakespeare on Wheels Scholarship. My dear friend Mia, who also received the scholarship and also attended Cobalt with me, could not be here today. But in her gratitude for Mr. Brown, she created a painting that she's giving to Mr. Kevin and the family.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Can we open it to people? Okay. We'll do the unveiling right here. Can you grab that paper? And there we have it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Now, you might think we painted portraits at Cobalt, but we learned so much more. Me and I were 2 of 9 students who were from across the country accepted into this program, and we learned everything from the basics of paints, learning what paint actually is, how it affects different kinds of materials and fabric in the theater world. We learned how to paint properly, keeping in mind your posture, how to keep your wrists safe, and thinking of the future of like avoiding carpal tunnel and just keeping yourself healthy. We learned the do's and don'ts of geometry, how to center an image, how to scale it properly. We learned to measure twice and cut once. And of course, we learned to paint. We specifically painted 3D geometric shapes, old-fashioned and furnished woods, marbles, drapery, foliage, skies and clouds. We learned how to paint on surfaces that specifically did not adhere to paint, and that was fun. And we learned how to create a translucent backdrop with paints and dyes. Every project we did was in large scale, and every project we did was learned quickly, but under the great supervision of these 2 women that were guiding us. The knowledge and skills we gained from experiencing this was not something we could have learned at any 4-year university. It was something specifically catered to our need. And without the Shakespeare on Wheels scholarship, I know myself I would not have gone to experience this. So, Mr. Brown, I wish I could have met him and just expressed my thanks to him. But I truly am blessed to have benefited from his scholarship. Thank you.
And now we finish today's very special performance with Act 3. Bill has retired from UMBC and is now exploring a life without teaching. Bill joked that after so many years of teaching, he often forgot what day of the week it was in his retirement. He threw himself into his passion for woodwork. His basement workshop would be the envy of any craftsman. For a brief time, Bill was courted to direct and design shows with a local community theater. Knowing Bill, of course, he tried his best. But when the actors began to make excuses for why they couldn't make a rehearsal because, well, there's a music concert and you don't want to go to that or, something else happening, Bill knew he couldn't work with folks that weren't 100% committed to the process of a theater production. Travel with his second wife, Fran, and finding ways to fill his creative needs took up much of his free time. Welcome his granddaughter, Annalise Parham.
What a treat. Thank you all for sharing everything that you've shared today, and I feel honored to be up on a stage with such fantastic artists and speakers and musicians, so thank you for letting me be a part of this. Grandpa Brown. It was always a complex family dynamic. I remember knowing that even as a little girl. There was an underlying tension that drove the plot forward, one scene at a time. Act 1, Scene 1. My earliest memory of Grandpa Brown, I was 4 maybe, a little bit younger maybe. I recall the anticipation, looking out the window while waiting for him to arrive for a visit, seeing his town car pull around the corner into our driveway. He's here. Scene 2. Into the door comes my wonderful grandfather. His smell, wood shop and something old-fashioned, maybe cologne, as I nuzzle into his gray hair. A box of forbidden fruit under his arm. Fruit Loops, to be exact. Not allowed by parents, but here it was, complete with a prize inside. A squishy toy that I could throw against the wall and watch as it tumbled down to the floor. I remember watching that toy roll down the wall. Grandpa laughed and laughed as my parents gazed, knowing they couldn't do anything about it. Scene 3, visiting Grandpa Brown. This meant entering a world in miniature. His intricate train sets laid out for what seemed like miles to my small eyes. I would peer over the wondrous world that he had created in awe and amazement as the train speeded along. He took joy in some of life's simplest pleasures, setting up a train set scene, carving an elaborate wooden clock, gifting his granddaughter with a sugary treat under the disapproving glances of her parents. Scene 3. Please, can I go in Grandpa Brown's car? I would beg, giddy as I slid into the sprawling back seat that dwarfed our family compact. Grandpa, this car is big enough to fit an elephant's bottom, I said. He laughed, also shaking his head, probably thinking kids these days. Act 2, Scene 1. At Grandpa and Fran's wedding. Brand new house, biggest my small eyes had ever taken in, white and fresh, women click-clacking around, giving me red lipstick all over my face as I was making each introduction, a frilly dress for me to wear to celebrate Grandpa. Scene 2, exploring. Visiting Grandpa Brown meant opportunities to peek and find. Tiny treasures he had made long ago. How long? He was an ancient figure to me compared to my few years on the earth. Objects collected and commissioned abroad, stories that fell out from an ebony statue, a carved mask, a shiny object. A book of yellowing photographs showing my mom and my uncles at my own age. Impossible. Act 3, Scene 1. Movies. Grandpa Brown set up an enviable movie cave and had the widest screen TV I had ever seen long before anyone else I knew. He delighted in putting on a picture for us to watch. He was almost indifferent to what the movie was, critically acclaimed or almost completely plotless. It didn't really matter to him. He would watch with enjoyment. As I grew older, he would let me sit in his special seat, the massage chair. Sitting side by side, the worse the movie, the better, actually, because it brought out more conversation between us as we tried to fill the time where the plot wasn't. As I got older, I realized more and more that the time might be running out for these tales of his past, of our family history seen through his eyes. The truth is, we didn't visit all the time. We didn't have family traditions or holidays spent the same way each year. Some of the characters were destined to clash each time we stepped onto the same stage, thus putting off the next visit to Grandpa Brown's house. Act 4, Scene 1. When I left for college, it became clear to me that I could write my own scenes now with Grandpa. I reached out, emailed, sent him my stories I wrote while studying abroad in Ghana and Spain. Grandpa and Fran visited me at NYU. We ate together at a vegetarian restaurant. That, in and of itself, showed how much he loved me. We talked over water and salad. I'm not sure he ate much of it. My theater experience, his theater experience, my time in Africa, his time in Africa. I had an insatiable appetite for the stories of my mom's childhood and my grandpa's past, and this was the time to feed it. Scene 2. At my college graduation, he was tickled pink to be included, and I was beaming from the knowledge that he was there and that he was so proud of my accomplishments. Act 5, Scene 1. I don't think I realized until my wedding, but in some ways you could say I married a younger version of my grandfather. I chose a man deep in the theater, in the technical theater of sets and lights, and the behind-the-scenes magic that Grandpa was so good at creating. A man who loved projects he could complete with his own two hands. The two of them immediately hit it off, my husband David and Grandpa Brown. Scene 2. On July 21st, 2012, I gave birth to Theodore William Kahn. You may have heard him in the background through some of this. David called Grandpa to tell him the joyful news. "Did you know," said Grandpa, "that William is my first name?" "Yes, we know," explained David. "He's named after you." But that was Grandpa. It may not have been right then, but if it had started earlier, this certainly helped it to grow. What? The family picture wall. Grandpa curated this studiously in his basement. He would grab pictures from emails, he would take them from Facebook, he would enlarge them to insane sizes where you could only see pixels, but he loved them, and he printed them and he put them on this wall, and you could see the entire family growing on his study wall. He and Fran would also clip Theo's face from pictures and add funny captions, then print them out, laminate them, and send them to us on holidays or random days. This was the joy of Theo's life, to receive these funny pictures of himself with animal clip art surrounding him and strange little things that his great-grandfather thought that he might be saying. He was enthralled. Scene 2. Then came his great-granddaughter, Margaret Jean Parham. Grandpa was getting more uncomfortable with long trips by then, so we stopped in for a visit to make sure he got a chance to meet May. To Grandpa's great delight, he was called Bebop Brown by now, his great-grandparent name, May took her first steps at Bebop Brown's home, with him watching. Act 6, Scene 1. The ending may seem abrupt, because it was. Scene 2. We were so fortunate to have made our last trip. It still feels that we missed out, especially for the kids. They ask about Bebop Brown still. We have pictures and stories. We tell the stories again and again. It was always a complex family dynamic. There was drama and there were tales to tell. But then again, it was Grandpa Brown's family, a theater family, through and through. We had, together, a number of truly wonderful scenes. Thank you.
And now to bring Act 3 to a close, Please welcome once again Bill's son, Kevin Brown.
Brothers and sisters, we are gathered here today to talk about one of our fallen colleagues of our community, Brother Bill Brown. Can I have an amen for Brother Bill? Amen. I said, can I have an amen for Brother Bill? Now, Brother Bill was a fine man. He was a pillar of the community. Now, I didn't see him often at church, but I knew he was doing God's work. He was bringing theater to the community. Can I have an amen for bringing theater to the community? Amen. Now, the Lord works in mysterious ways, brothers and sisters. You know, sometimes it takes some of us from us and we don't know why. I said, you know, the Lord took Bill Brown last year, and I wondered, now, why did he take him last year? Do you know why? Do you want to know why? I said, do you want to know why? Because he needed a set designer in heaven, that's why. Last year I heard that Billy Shakes was complaining because he had a production of the Scottish play he wanted to do, and he needed a set designer. And someone said, well, you know, in Ellicott City there's this fine set designer, and you know, Billy Shakes is what he likes to be called nowadays. Billy Shakes got a lot of pull with the Lord, and he gets who he wants. So up he went and gone from us, but that's all we can do. So here we are, brothers and sisters. We are gathered to remember a man of the arts, a man of theater, and a mentor to many. Can I have an amen for a mentor to many? Amen. And I'm here to tell you that when we are done grieving, and we're going to hurt because we lost somebody we love, I want you to take a moment. Take a moment and remember what Brother Bill brought to this world. I want you to think about what each of our lives would have been like without Brother Bill. Can I have an amen for Brother Bill? Amen. And we want to rejoice in the fact that we had Brother Bill for these moments in our lives. We had the honor of knowing such a man. We had the pleasure of knowing one of the Lord's angels on earth, if only for a short time. Let's take a few minutes and take a look at the life of a man who lived his life well.
That concludes this wonderful tribute to Professor William Brown. We ask you now to please join us in the lobby for our reception, for conversation, good fellowship, and tribute. Thank you for being a part of this wonderful, wonderful celebration.